what's up?
Now just recording a podcast. What's up with you?
Oh, not too much. You know what, though?
What?
You need a counselor.
Thanks, so do you.
I do need a counselor. You're right.
Hello, welcome back to You Need a Counselor. My name is Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder of Heart and Solutions, a counseling agency here in Iowa in the Midwest. And we are offering outpatient mental health counseling in all 7 of our office locations, as well as in many schools around rural Iowa. We are also doing telehealth right now. So if anybody's listening to this and interested in doing counseling over the phone or over the computer, give us a call because you can stay safe in your house. You don't have to go out in that horrible snow. You do not have to leave your house whatsoever. You don't have to mask up. You can go ahead and give a call from anywhere, or you can log in on your phone or on the computer.
I'm Krissa. I am the Vice President of Heart and Solutions. So I'm in charge of the Behavioral Health Department, where we work with kids ages 4 to 18 on different behavioral skills. We usually do go in-home, but we can also do in-office or school or telehealth as well, like Julie mentioned. And this is You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So we post on Sunday nights. So if you are in a couple with a special person, we're going to talk about couples today. So if you are in a couple with a special person, save up all your laundry for Sunday night, and you guys can sort socks together on Sunday nights. Batch up all your laundry. Don't do that throughout the week. You've got date nights to do. So go ahead and save it for Sunday night. And that's when we post every episode. So go ahead and give us a listen. That gives you all week to call your counselor, get scheduled, or to call in and find a new counselor to go ahead and get scheduled with for that week. Today, we are going to talk about couples. We're going to talk about relationships. I don't even want to limit ourselves to talking about couples. We're going to talk about relationships. We've got Valentine's Day coming up, and I will tell you, we always have a spike in referrals in the end of January, beginning of February. And I always wonder if it has to do with Valentine's Day sometimes. And I also wonder if it is just kind of affected by the new year and New Year's resolutions, and also the weather here in January and all of that snow that we've been getting. So we have today with us a relationship expert to talk to you about why you and your relationship partner or partners need a counselor. And so we've got Babita Spinelli. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here.
So you are you're not only a psychotherapist, but you are also a certified coach and a relationship expert. And you founded 2 organizations. We're going to talk about Opening the Door Psychotherapy, as well as the Babita Spinelli Group. So can you tell us about Opening the Door Psychotherapy first?
Sure. Opening the Door Psychotherapy is more of my traditional psychotherapy, practice where, there is psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and working in the space of couples work, individuals, family, a lot of focus also on divorce support therapy, as well as blended families, etc. And it has offices, brick and mortar, New York and New Jersey. And so a lot of individuals, it was the first organization that I founded, when I decided to transition careers and go into private practice. So that's Opening the Door Psychotherapy. Babita Spinelli Group is an expansion. So Babita Spinelli Group basically is a mix of a lot of different services that you have coaching in there. So there's a lot of relationship coaching globally. So it's much broader. I offer hypnotherapy in Babita Spinelli Group as well. There's also a lot of workplace relationship dynamics, mental health consulting, speaking, etc., at companies all over the world. So Babita Spinelli Group is international and everything is virtual.
Wow. So very accessible for anybody in the world.
Yes, very accessible. And it was really formed because as the practice grew bigger and as, started to get a lot more reach outs to either speak somewhere or actually run a workshop, or a lot of couples reaching out to me globally, it just seemed very valuable to be able to expand what's offered and form Babita Spinelli Group.
And you said that when you opening the door psychotherapy, you were transitioning careers. What were you doing before you opened that group?
Yeah, so I started off being an attorney. So I was a lawyer, and then I went into corporate America. And when I really transitioned, I was on Wall Street as an executive there. It was at that time that I really started to also think about what is, life purpose essentially, and what I really wanted to do as far as work that I felt would be meaningful for me. And I realized that I really wanted to be a psychotherapist through my own therapeutic journey. And I transitioned into, went back to school, clinical training, and started my practice.
Wow. You must have had a very, very substantial experience going to your own therapy to make you do a change like that, because that's such a drastic change, but it sounds like it's very passion based. And so you must have had a wonderful experience in counseling.
I really did. I am so grateful for my therapeutic journey. At that time, I was really stuck career-wise. What I was doing, I did well, but I really did feel like my calling was elsewhere. And so I feel grateful for my journey, but I did know that that wasn't going to be the second part of my journey. And I also was dealing with, my own relationship issues. And so I was extremely fascinated by relationships. And in my own therapeutic journey, I really unpacked that and then topped that off with some coaching, which kind of like took me over to like taking some more action steps. But my therapist was like, have you thought about being a therapist? And I was like, oh. And literally she handed me a bunch of books, and I did some due diligence and really thought about it and reflected and kind of went from there. So it was impactful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you experienced something like that and you decided to dedicate your life to spreading that message and sharing that so that other people can have a similar experience.
It really was, which is why I feel so comfortable to be able to say that therapy changed my life and how significant and impactful therapy counseling is, because there's a lot of fears around going to counseling or starting therapy. And there can sometimes be, either it might be community based where it may not be as accepted, or people might have a certain stigma around it or fear about what it would look like. So this is why with confidence, I say that it changed my life. And I even have that on my website. I'm very transparent about that.
Were there any barriers that you had to overcome to get started on that journey?
Yes. I think the first one was, from my family of origin, really being able to work through that. Because I'm going to therapy, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. Right? I'm seeing it as something that actually is, takes transparency and vulnerability, and really, as Brene Brown says, it's daring greatly when you take that step. And so that was one of the barriers. And then I think overall, just accepting feeling stuck and being okay with asking for help, and that there's really nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Wow. I'm picturing you as this. You're on Wall Street, right? You're successful, right? You're doing what successful people do. And so I can imagine that, that career success that you're having as an attorney in New York is wonderful if that's what somebody's passion is. But for you to be able to, it turns into sometimes a hurdle to overcome, right? That success in life, because then you have to turn around and be able to have the willingness to say, I need some help too, right? And I want to achieve these goals, and I'm going to go to see a counselor. So that's really great. You had some obstacles there, and family can be such a challenging dynamic, which is very interesting that you study relationships now and that you continue to educate other people about relationships.
I'm glad you're saying that, because yes, you're right. The other barrier is your own internalized narrative about what you think you should be doing or what you think is going to make you happy. And then all of the voices of what others' opinions are around it. And so, yes, I would say those were also barriers as well. And made me fascinated with the relationship to ourselves and the relationship to others.
When families or different variations of people having different relationships come to you, what would you say are there barriers for them coming in? So we talk a lot about barriers for individuals coming into counseling, but would you say that there are some specific barriers that people can overcome in terms of coming in to work on a relationship?
Yes. So, and as we know, as you're saying it broadly, there are all different kinds of relationships. But let's take, for example, first the relationship, a couple. And they may have some barriers because there may be some fears that if they start counseling, that things are going to get worse. Or they have a fear that it's going to uncover some things that are really uncomfortable that their partner may not be aware of. There's a lot of shame also, and that comes up in couples work, and because you're really looking at things in a lot of vulnerability, and so there's a lot of fear and shame around experiences that one has had and that they feel like they're going to be sharing that in the couple space. So those are some of the resistances. And I think also there may be an experience where couples have said, we took some time knowing we could do it ourselves, and then we realized that we needed help. So at first it's, no, we can fix it, which is great, if people can do that. But then there may be a realization sometimes that they might need just a little bit more. They need a safe space of someone to help navigate these things that come up.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then with regard to other relationships, other things, parent adolescent, how are you going to speak to each other in this space? Maybe the adolescent is afraid of what mom or dad might say. And so often in those situations, I like to have some individual sessions and then bring them together. We have relationships like blended families, right? Where they're operating in different ways and now they are merging the families. And so there's a lot of concern. How do we all talk about this? How do we communicate in a space with a professional? And then you've got workplace relationship where someone, might be coming in and they're really struggling in the workplace, but they may feel uncomfortable talking about it because it might be labeling or identifying that they can't handle work.
That is a very interesting one. I feel like workplace relationships don't get talked about very often in terms of counseling. We hear about marriage counselors and couples counselors and family counselors, but I hardly ever hear about workplace relationship counseling. Can you tell us more about that? That sounds really interesting.
It usually is individual, even though it is relationship work, but it is the relationship that the individual has to their colleagues as well as to the organization and even to their managers. And we really look very deeply at emotional states of why certain emotions are coming up in the workplace. What might that be about? What they might be repeating in the workplace. Maybe they're bringing some things up in their personal side into the workplace. But then we also get very tool oriented in terms of really coaching on being more, let's say, empathic, communicating in a certain way with their colleagues or with their boss. Noticing if they need to build relationships in a different way, if they've been tasked a project and they're trying to move that forward, building self-esteem and confidence in the workplace. I even do some, working on presenting. Maybe they need a little EMDR to help, find voice, feeling more empowered in the workplace. If someone, has been furloughed, then we look at what that's like for them. If someone survived a furlough, we look at the guilt that sometimes
survivor
comes up.
guilt. Yeah.
Right? There's so much in the workplace dynamic that comes up. And if it's either that, or I may have an organization say, Babita, can you speak to a team or at a town hall around what can come up in the workplace and what we need to be cognizant or mindful of.
What an interesting, we're in Iowa, so not to say that Iowa does not have a fair amount of services. However, we just don't have the specialization always, right? To go that specific. But when you talk about a workplace, and I think about the place that Krista and I work, and there's 40 plus of us, and it is like a family. There is a system within this organization. It's a living, breathing organization, the same way that a family is constantly moving, right? And constantly adapting and evolving. And that is just so interesting, because with 40 plus people all working together towards an outcome, there are infinite, I won't say infinite, I guess, but more than I can calculate different relationships, right? Variations on the different relationships happening between coworkers, between people in different departments. So how interesting that comes under that heading of relationship counseling, because everything that we do is about relationships.
So true. And you're so right as you describe your organization, because it's so true, right? It's a real diverse space. The counseling aspects that would come up in regular counseling comes up in relationship workplace counseling. If you think about projection, if you think about, right, where there might be situations of not feeling heard or feeling more empowered, because it is like a family. So all of those things do come up. Sometimes what comes up is I might have someone who is the leader of an organization, like a CEO. And those are great individuals to also work with, because if they're looking at the relationship dynamics to themselves and in the workplace, they're then going to bring that into their large organization, right? And you're going to have a trickle down effect that our leader is being so woke and looking at this dynamic and learning and strategizing and understanding it, and then bringing it back to his department or to his company.
Absolutely. I mean, it really does impact everything that happens in the organization and every relationship in there, because it sets the tone. And do you work with all different kinds of companies?
I do all different kinds. I've worked with agencies, I've worked with practices, and then I've worked with larger financial institutions, firms, not-for-profits.
That is really cool. We've talked to some people on the podcast who have done like business coaching, but what you're talking about, it sounds like, in the Babita Spinelli group, it kind of falls under the umbrella of business coaching. But what you're talking about also is very unique, because you're focusing on those relationships and the relationships that make up the organization. So I think that's fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I love it, because it really is bringing in more of some of those mental health concepts that are really important. So it does have that different aspect to it when we think about the relationship side. That's a little different from business coaching.
Absolutely. What would you say when somebody is thinking about going to a relationship expert or a marriage and family therapist to work on their relationship, let's say a couple, what would you say to that person in terms of the barriers that they might be experiencing?
Well, when I look at, couples that have those fears, I usually like to say that, the first very meaningful step is trying to push through those fears and really maybe trusting the process. So you're taking the first step to say, I want to go to counseling, but I'm afraid. And so allow yourself the room to talk about it with the potential therapist so that you can build some trust in the process. The second thing I would say is it's okay to maybe do a little bit of research, figure out who the right fit is for you. What kind of style are you looking for? What kind of, maybe there's a method or a certain kind of couple sort of lens that you want in the work? Because I think that provides reassurance. Many of the couples that come to me with some fears, I spend a lot of time in consultation, really just helping to build the trust in the process, answering their questions, maybe asking them what they might be afraid about, and sharing more and more about my approach so that they can get some comfort level. So I would say to those couples, it's okay to do your due diligence and take your time. I would say that it's always scary to start anything new. And remember those times in your life where you might have been afraid to start something that maybe you'd been able to actually work through, and it ended up being a positive or a growth experience. That no matter what, you're going to learn something.
Yes, absolutely. What I love about that is that you're acknowledging the fear that often comes with going to counseling. The idea that you're going to have to potentially share aspects of yourself or your history that your partner may not know about, and not knowing how your partner will respond to that information. So what I like about that is that you are giving space for the fear, and you're saying it's okay to feel this fear, and let's talk about that fear before we talk about anything else. Let's process that out, and let's give that the time for us to be able to work through before we get into anything else that the fear might be about. So I really like that process of that, because sometimes I think people are afraid to say that they're afraid. And so we go in and we say, well, I'm here for couples counseling, right? Because so-and-so wants me to be here. But the idea of that it is okay if you are afraid, that you can still get some benefit out of those sessions, that you can still move at your own pace, and that you do have the right to ask questions about your therapist, and ask questions about what it is that they're doing, and look that up on your own. So when you are working with a couple, what kinds of techniques do you like to do? And what kinds of techniques would you tell a couple who's thinking about counseling to maybe look up and start exploring?
What a great question. So once we've done a consult and we've explored the fear and they feel like, okay, we want to take that step, what I like to do is this. So I have trained in Gottman, which I think is an amazing methodology to approach with couples. I've also trained in emotionally focused techniques and did some imago work. And I'm an analyst, a psychoanalyst. So what I like to do is I like to have a particular structure, but hold it loosely. So I often will ask the couple, would you want to take the Gottman assessment? Do you want to sort of map out your journey so we can actually see sort of some couples like data where we can see, okay, here are some strengths, here's some things to work on. Couples who like to do that, couples who I recognize, and I think sort of part of it is just kind of like the years I've been doing this, right? Since they like the tools, they like the structure, they want to use that, tend to say yes to that, or they want the data. And then we sort of really map those tools accordingly. However, I also am very attuned that we don't have to stick to that structure. And that's where emotionally focused techniques, where we go into a little bit more of the feeling state, where we start to also go into a bit of imago, and we're looking at family history and how that impacts and what we're bringing in to the relationship because of what we've learned and been modeled from our own family histories, from our parents, or our relationships with others. And so I like to bring that in too. In a nutshell, I kind of formulate everything that's unique to the couple, and then I share with the couple my lens on how I would imagine their process kind of flowing after I've like sort of assessed and sat with them a few sessions. And then we start from there. I get their comfort and their buy-in to the process. And I do ask them to do some work in between session, because a lot of times that's where the work is. And I say, look, part of our process is what you do with me, but how you apply it outside of session, and then circle back. And we're going to talk about what that was like. And it's okay if it gets a little messy. Present before perfect, right? Let's just begin. So that's just some of the ways that I start. And I know there's a lot more than that, but I'm just giving sort of the sweeping landscape in terms of the way I work.
I really like that, because I think that sometimes for couples, there's this sense that something is not working. But I think with couples, it's a little bit harder to see for ourselves within our own relationship what it is that's not working. And what I like about the option to have that structure, or to go more into the history and the emotional side of things, right? What we know emotionally, what we feel. I like that, because either way, and whichever way the couple seems most comfortable with, either way, we're going to be learning about ourselves as people, or we're going to be learning about ourselves as a couple. And these are things that typically a married couple or a dating couple we're not going to give ourselves these we might do a Cosmo quiz, right? Or something like that to say, is my relationship hot or not? Okay. But in terms of,
Yes.
in terms of looking at our own family tree, looking at our own upbringing, what are the messages we learned about relationships? How did we learn how relationships are supposed to be, or how we're supposed to talk to each other? Those are things that really do need prompting, and kind of do need some of that structure and those technique with a third party, because when we are in that couple, I think it's very easy to see the flaws in the other person, but not so much the dynamic of the couple as a whole, because we're part of it. So we're part of the problem, and we're part of the solution, and we're part of what is holding us back from our goals, and therefore we're part of what's going to bring us towards our goals. But we're so close to it that sometimes we can't.
Yes, that is so true. And I think that, and it's very rich, right? Kind of diving into that. And part of what I also will describe to the couple, why I think couples therapies can be so helpful, having a third party, is before we even dive into it, I provide the communication tool to show them how they're going to talk about it. And that's sort of like almost my 101 from the beginning. Like, first, I'm going to tell you how we're going to talk about everything. So you're going to already know your communication tool as we're talking about these things that might feel difficult to talk about. I think that that's also reassuring, because, right, it can get a little heavy talking about history and family, or talking about things that are triggering or what's coming up in the relationship. And particularly in high conflict, particularly because one of my specialties is infidelity, narcissism. Those spaces are so critical to have the couples understand that there's a communication tool and the way to be able to go into it before just plunging into it.
Yeah, I really like that. It sounds like you really lay a very strong foundation before you even start going into what the specific conflict of the week might be. And I think sometimes when we picture couples counseling from, pop culture, right? We think about you go in and you have a fight in front of the counselor, and then, right? And then you go home and it's the same fight. You're just having it in front of another person. That's not comfortable.
Yes.
What I like about what you're saying is that before you even get into, well, he never loads the dishwasher, right? And she never listens to me. And those kinds of specific conflicts, you're assessing who that couple is as a couple, how best to work with them together. But then also you're assessing how their communication style is currently, how they do navigate those conflicts currently. And then you're teaching them, you're giving them skills first to say, okay, this is how you are doing it. Let's practice some skills, not about the dishwasher, right? But some skills to be able to talk through the conflicts, no matter what the conflict is. And so I think it's very, I think in a couple, or really in any relationship, it's very tempting to get caught up in like, well, the problem in the relationship is my mother-in-law won't butt out, right? Or like this, they don't discipline the kids the way that I would, and things like this. But really what you're talking about is a solution, or a way of communicating and working through conflicts, that it doesn't matter what the specific conflict of the week is. They're building the tools to be able to talk those out and work those out together as a couple. So
That's it.
Teaching them to fish, right? Instead of.
Yes, that's exactly it. I love how you put that. That's exactly it. And when they transition out, when they're ready to transition out, and some couples like to do my maintenance program, and they want to do bits and pieces of couples coaching, I always say to them, you're going to have your basket of stuff. My goal is that you're not going to need me. I'm here to support you, because you know what, things come up in life, right? But you're going to have your stuff and you're going to reach into it and you're going to be like, okay, we're just going to go back and apply it. And I think that can just be really helpful, because we're not band-aiding things. We're going into the wound and then we're working through it. And so anything that comes up. So you're exactly right.
I'm very interested in the hypnotherapy service that you provide. Is this something that you do with couples and relationships, or is this solely an individual service?
When I do it in terms of relationships, it is individual. So each individual in the couple, under the couple's umbrella, would go through what we're going to focus on in terms of the hypnotherapy. And then it also is just the individual themselves, as far as, let's say, they're recognizing that their inner critic is so powerful at the office or in their relationship. Then we go into their inner critic in the hypnosis, and we try and work through, and we bring that part out. And then we work through shifting that part in the hypnotherapy. So it is interesting. It's very powerful. There's that technique, hypnotherapy. And then I also do a lot of EMDR in relationship work, finding your voice in your relationship, feeling more confidence in your relationship, being able to speak to shaming things in your relationship, etc. So it is under couples umbrella, but it's on each individual person.
Do the couple together, do they identify those goals together and then they do their individual work? Or does each individual identify their own goals and then do the individual work and then come together?
It goes in either direction. But I will tell you what usually happens is that each person individually can think about the things that they want to work on. So under the couples umbrella, I always have an individual session each, and that, many couples therapists do that, because you want to just have that space where you're sort of understanding that individual's persons, right? You want to assess what are their goals, what's their subjective experience, etc. Then circle back in with their partner. So during that time, and as we're going through the couple's journey, the individual starts to reflect on what they might want to work on, and I might guide to say it might be helpful if this. So that tends to be the norm. But I have had couples that as a unit have gone, they've talked it through, they come back and say, we'd like to work on this in terms of hypnotherapy.
Very interesting. And for any listeners who don't know what EMDR is, could you describe that a little bit?
What EMDR does is this. I'm going to just put in very simplistic terms right now, is it takes, for example, the skeletons in our closet. It takes the part of the brain that has held the trauma, and trauma could be all sorts of things. It could be the inability, the anxiety, the inability to have voice something, to everything to having had a traumatic experience, let's say 9/11, right? So what I do is it moves the space of the trauma, of the issue, from one part of the brain that's stuck in it into the other, which allows it to process it. And when the processing takes place, it makes it less powerful. So it doesn't live in a powerful way. The story almost becomes a reel. So you know that it's there, but you're not feeling it in the way that you used to, and it's not impeding you in the way that you used to.
I like that. It becomes a real, and that gives us the control to be able to say, I'm going to play this reel or I'm not going to play this reel. And it's going to be helpful. My experience with this is going to be helpful to me in this context. And so I'm going to choose to play it. And it's not going to be helpful to me in this other context. And it doesn't have the ability to hijack our daily choices, right? We get to choose when we want to play that and when we don't want to play that experience.
Absolutely. And I think the beauty of it is it also goes, if you suddenly find yourself going back in time in your reel and getting to the root of where that may come from, what you can do in, psychodynamic psychotherapy as well, but it's another modality. So someone might say, this issue, this gridlock keeps coming up with my partner. And when we do the EMDR, they'll find out that, in grammar school, they were shamed by their teacher. So whenever their partner says that, all of that trauma comes back up.
And then we can have the understanding of that, and to say, okay, the reaction I'm having to that is not against my partner. My partner is not making me feel this way by saying like, hey, are you going to pick up your socks? Right? My partner is just saying, are you going to pick up your socks?
Right.
And this experience is still, it's still my experience. But it doesn't have to control that situation and that interaction with my partner where they say, pick up your socks.
Exactly. And then as the person that's getting the EMDR piece, sometimes my clients will say after a week or something, I don't know, I felt different. I felt a little less anxious. And then 2 weeks will go by and they'll say, wow, I feel really so much lighter. I was so much less triggered, or I noticed I voiced this. So depending on what you're working on. And so that also, EMDR is a very beautiful, I would say, impactful modality to use. But again, you have to be comfortable with it. And everybody is unique in terms of what they want to do in their treatment.
It sounds like, as you're describing all of the different modalities that you use, you do a lot of checking in with your clients and seeing how they're processing with each of the steps in each of the modalities.
I do a lot of checking in. Yes. I think for my lens as the therapist, this is a mutual experience. And so I'm growing as much as they're growing. So I like to check in, and I also like to check in to kind of see where we are in the process, how they're feeling, about it. I think that can be encouraging for individuals who might have some fears about starting therapy, is that there can be a checking in. And if they feel like that may not happen, they can also articulate to the therapist, this is new for me. And so I'd love, do you do process checks, or can we do it, a check-in? The reason I also do check-ins, and you may have experienced this in the practice, is often it helps individuals that are going to counseling to identify their emotions and give voice to them versus maybe accommodating to the therapist, or maybe they don't even know what they're feeling. So I think it's like a parallel process by doing that check-in.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that having that time set for those kind of regular check-ins, or having a therapist that checks in with you on how you are doing, it can give voice to thoughts or feelings that you wouldn't have otherwise have come to your attention. And I noticed that a lot of clients will have that moment of, well, because you asked, here's what I am thinking. And I wasn't aware of that prior, right? But when we're asked, we go, oh, okay. And it almost gives us permission to experience what is going on with ourselves. So I really like that. I think that is such a benefit to going to counseling too, just having those check-ins, and also knowing that the counselor that you're working with wants to get that feedback from you, that counselor is there to follow your lead and your pace to make sure that you're able to express how things are going. I almost said to make sure that things are going well, and that's not what I meant. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because you know what? It's another relationship.
That's right.
So if they can experience the relationship with their therapist in a way that's empathic and holding, where they feel like maybe there's a check-in, or that they can verbalize, say, even if they feel angry at their therapist, that's what they're going to also take into their outside world. So the relationship work also starts with the relationship with your therapist.
Yeah, that relationship is so important. And I think that it really highlights also what you talked about in the beginning about doing research on the therapist that you might work with, and asking them questions and giving it the time to see how you feel comfortability wise with that person, because that relationship is going to be so critical in any of the interventions that we're doing.
Yes, absolutely. So true.
So you talked a little bit about transference as well, both in relationships in the workplace and also in relationships, couples, families. Can you talk just a little bit more about that? And when do you identify that? And then what are some interventions that you might take a family or a couple through?
Transference, right? Our dear friend that comes into where I think it comes into every therapeutic space. If I look at it in terms of couples work, transference tends to come in around each partner's perhaps relationship to one of their parents. Usually it tends to be that, or it could be a relationship they've had previous to the relationship that they're sitting, that's sitting in front of me. And we might notice, for example, that someone is, let's do the sock example, right? Let's say that someone keeps getting triggered by the socks on the floor. And there could be the transference could, again, the common one is feeling parentified, but it could also be maybe the person might have had a parent that never really took care of them. So they might leave the socks on the floor because they're hoping that their partner, this is all right, transference, will keep picking up after them because that never happened in their childhood. It's their way of thinking that someone cares. Transference, right? Now their partner may then have a counter transference or their own transference, so to speak, which is maybe some anger around that because they've had to be caregiver, let's say in their life. Maybe they were an older sibling. Maybe they had a role of actually being a parent to their parent, whatever it is. So when they have to pick up the socks, they're going to feel angry. Now look at what you have. So if you can have those two people, when I have a couple and that's come up with something like that, I might say to them, can we take a step back and maybe notice where this might be coming from, what this really might be about? I remember, let's say, Mary, you mentioned to me about the relationship in your family and how much you had to do all the time. And Chris, you talked about never really feeling cared for. Can we both look at that and see that it may be possible that this goes beyond just the socks and what that is about? Boom, right?
And that just
take it from there. Just take it from there. So that's one. The other one, I like them to do an exercise. What are our triggers? And so my couples, that's an exercise they might bring home with. They write it out, what their triggers are. We come back to it, and then we can decipher what might be the transference. And I explain that concept to them. Wonderful. Right? Sometimes it's not always transference, sometimes it is. So there's that. We also talk about techniques like if we notice that things are coming up, I like them to do a State of the Union. So when you sit down every week and you talk through things, you can actually say at that time, that really reminded me of when so-and-so did this to me. Or, I was cheated on in my past relationship. So when you didn't call when you were coming home late, I automatically went there. So I also bring in different communication techniques and things that they can do to ensure that they're proactively noticing and talking about it and expressing it.
Wonderful. And it sounds like couples can come and benefit from couples counseling or family counseling at any stage in their relationship, because these are skills that will last, hopefully, the span of the relationship.
At any stage, I have clients right now who are empty nesters, clients who've been married for 40 years. So I say that right here to encourage people. Yeah. It could be at any stage. And then I have couples that are new parents or parents to be, and I have, the premarital. So it really can be at any stage. And I have couples who literally are on the brink of divorce and they're deciding what to do. So it goes at any stage, and it could be, anything. So I want to open up that space. You're absolutely right.
I love that and you've done it twice now. You've included divorcing or divorced couples in couples that are in relationships, because even after a divorce, you're still in a relationship, whether you talk to each other or not, there's a relationship still there. I really like that you talk about the entire span of the relationship.
Yes. I mean, in divorce, there's so much in that space around a couple deciding if they are or not. That's called discernment counseling. And I say, it's a structure to that. And if you choose whichever path you choose, we're doing it with grace, amicability, and a deeper understanding of yourselves. So that's really huge. And then I have a lot of individuals that come to me post-divorce, rebuilding the relationship to themselves, In fact, there's so much to that I'm developing a course that I'm going to roll out because I feel like so many individuals have asked to kind of work in that space around the relation to themselves post-divorce.
Wow, wonderful. That sounds great. So, how will somebody find you? So, how does somebody find the Babita Spinelli group, and how do they find Opening the Doors Psychotherapy?
So Babita Spinelli Group, babitaspinelligroup.com is the website. And Opening the Doors Psychotherapy, openingthedoorspsychotherapy.com. If they just Google my name, like all of it's going to come up. Like this, I love to put out content. So there's a lot of free resources too. So if they even just put in Babita Spinelli, they're going to kind of see the things that pop up, and they can email me, call me. I love the phone call. I do respond, etc. So that's the best way to go in, either direction.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of great resources there. And it seems like between Opening the Doors Psychotherapy and the Babita Spinelli group, there's such an array of services that you do provide that almost anybody could benefit from one or more of those services. So that's really, really helpful for people to know about.
Thank you. Yeah, I really love what I do. And there isn't any technique that I haven't tried myself. There isn't anything that I put out there that I myself have not experienced, found benefit from, etc.
That's wonderful. That makes it such a more genuine experience to get services from somebody who has experienced those services and can kind of meet people where they are because they've been exactly there. So that's wonderful.
My name is Babita Spinelli, and you need a counselor.
Yes, and everybody does. And relationships, every relationship can benefit from counseling. And you've heard about a lot of relationships today. Couples, parents, and kids, even separated couples or couples that are divorcing and co-parenting, any sort of relationship can definitely benefit from some kind of intentional work, right? And intentional ways of being. So wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. It's been really great. And we hope that you will join us again.
Thank you so much. I would love to. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. If you are in New York or New Jersey, make sure that you call so that you can get signed up for Opening the Doors Psychotherapy. If you are in Iowa, make sure you call us at Heart and Solutions. You can reach us at 800-531-4236. You can also find the podcast on Facebook and on Instagram at You Need a Counselor Podcast, and send us questions. And if you've got questions for Babita that you would like her to answer the next time that she's on the podcast, let us know. Go ahead and send them over to us, and we will make sure that we ask Babita to answer those on the next episode.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning, we do post our videos every Sunday night, and we do have a little trailer clip that we post on Fridays as well on our social media, so you can kind of get a little preview of what you'll be listening to on Sunday. So save up your laundry with your special relationship person, and so you guys can do laundry together while you listen to our episode, or get ready to call your therapist that week and have the whole week to prepare to get ready for your therapy appointment as well. I'm Brown.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.